In the beginning, there was nothing unusual. Just a young family, living a busy but ordinary life, in a quiet American suburb where people waved at each other from driveways and left their porch lights on at night. The Eapen family lived in Newton, Massachusetts, a peaceful, well-kept area just outside Boston. The kind of place where families felt safe, where children played indoors during winter, where neighbors believed bad things happened somewhere else. Dr. Deborah Eapen was a respected pediatric anesthesiologist. Her job was demanding, long hours, unpredictable shifts. She spent her days caring for children in hospitals, watching over them while they slept under anesthesia, protecting them when they were most vulnerable. Her husband, Joseph Eapen, worked as a management consultant. His work often required travel. Long days, early mornings, late returns. They loved their children deeply. Their daughter, Rachel, was a toddler, energetic, curious, always moving. Their son, Matthew, was 8 months old, quiet, delicate, still learning how to sit up on his own. Matthew was small for his age, gentle, still very much a baby. The Eapens wanted the best for their children, but balancing careers and parenting was becoming harder. Daycare didn't fit their schedule. Family help wasn't always available. So they made a decision many families make. They decided to hire an au pair. Someone young, someone kind, someone who would live with them and become part of the household. They believed this would be safer, more personal, more loving. That's how Louise Woodward came into their lives. Louise was 18 years old. She came from England, from a middle-class family. She had siblings. She had no criminal record, no history of violence. Friends described her as quiet, polite, sometimes shy. She wanted adventure. She wanted experience. She wanted to spend time in America. Becoming an au pair seemed perfect. She arrived in the United States in late 1996 and moved into the Eapen home shortly afterward. She had her own room. She shared meals with the family. She helped with childcare while Deborah and Joseph worked. On the surface, everything seemed fine. Louise took care of Rachel and Matthew during the day. She fed them, changed them, played with Rachel, rocked Matthew when he cried. She called home to England sometimes. She wrote letters. She tried to adjust to a new country, a new family, a new responsibility. But caring for babies is not easy. Matthew cried often. Not unusual for an infant, but draining. He woke at night. He needed constant attention. He was fragile and dependent. Louise was young, inexperienced, far from home. She spent long stretches alone with the children. No co-workers, no supervisors, no breaks beyond nap time. The house was quiet, but not peaceful, just silent. Over time, Louise began telling friends and family that the job was harder than she expected. She said the baby cried a lot. She said she felt tired, sometimes overwhelmed. Still, nothing seemed alarming. Deborah and Joseph trusted her. They had no reason not to. They left her alone with Matthew many times. They believed he was safe. After all, Louise was there for one reason only, to protect him. Days passed. Then weeks. Winter settled in. Snow covered the streets. The house stayed warm inside, insulated from the outside world. Inside that house, routines continued. Bottles warmed. Diapers changed. Cries answered. Or at least, they were supposed to be. On February 4th, 1997, Deborah and Joseph went out for the evening. Louise was home alone with Matthew. Rachel was not there that night. It was just Louise and the baby. Later that evening, Louise said Matthew became unusually fussy. He wouldn't stop crying. She tried feeding him, rocking him, putting him down. Nothing worked. At some point, something changed. What exactly happened in that quiet house would later become the center of one of the most debated criminal cases of the decade. But in that moment, none of that mattered yet. All that mattered was that Louise picked up the phone and called emergency services. She said the baby wasn't breathing. Her voice sounded panicked, shaken, afraid. Paramedics arrived quickly. They found Matthew unresponsive, his small body limp. No obvious signs of injury. No blood. No chaos. Just a silent baby. They rushed him to the hospital. Doctors worked through the night. Tests were run. Scans were taken. Nurses whispered. Machines beeped softly in the background. Louise waited. Deborah and Joseph rushed to the hospital when they were notified. They stood beside their son's bed, watching strangers fight to save him. But Matthew never woke up. Early the next morning, doctors delivered the news no parent ever expects to hear. Matthew Eapen was dead. At first, there was disbelief. Shock. How could this happen in their own home? Doctors looked again at the scans. They reviewed the injuries. They began asking questions. And slowly, a terrible possibility emerged. Matthew's injuries were not consistent with an accident. They were consistent with violent shaking. Suddenly, the quiet home was no longer just a home. It was the place where something unthinkable may have happened. And the person hired to protect him was now at the center of it all. When Matthew Eapen died, the hospital room didn't erupt into chaos. There was no shouting, no screaming, just a quiet disbelief that settled over everyone present. Doctors had seen tragedy before, but this felt different. Matthew's body showed no cuts, no bruises on the surface, no obvious signs of violence. Yet the scans told a story the eye could not see. Severe brain swelling, bleeding inside the skull. Injuries that doctors knew did not come from rolling off a couch or slipping from someone's arms. These were injuries associated with violent shaking. That was when the questions began. Who had been with Matthew that night? The answer was simple. Only one person. Louise Woodward. Louise was taken aside and questioned by police while still at the hospital. She was calm at first. Soft-spoken. She explained that Matthew had been crying. That she tried to soothe him. That at some point, he stopped breathing. She said she didn't know why. But as the hours passed, her story shifted. Under continued questioning, Louise admitted something that would change everything. She said she had shaken Matthew. Not violently, she insisted. Not to hurt him. Just for a moment. Just to stop the crying. To her, it didn't feel dangerous. To investigators, it felt critical. Doctors explained that infants cannot withstand shaking the way adults can. Their neck muscles are weak. Their brains are delicate. What might feel small to an adult can be catastrophic to a baby. Louise was arrested. The news spread quickly. An 18-year-old au pair. A dead baby. A family shattered. She was charged with second-degree murder. The charge alone stunned people on both sides of the Atlantic. Some saw it as justice. Others saw it as extreme. Louise was held in jail. She was far from home. Her parents flew in from England. The Eapen family retreated into grief, rarely speaking publicly. The trial began months later. From the start, it was tense. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was cold and controlled. Wooden benches. Soft footsteps. Long silences. The prosecution spoke first. They laid out the timeline. They explained that Matthew was healthy before that night. That no one else had access to him. That Louise was alone with him for hours. They presented medical experts who testified that Matthew's injuries could only have been caused by severe shaking shortly before he collapsed. They played recordings of Louise's police interviews. The jury listened carefully as her words echoed through the room. "I shook him." Those words hung in the air. The defense countered with a different explanation. They argued that shaken baby syndrome was not as clear-cut as the prosecution claimed. That Matthew may have suffered earlier injuries. That his death could not be pinpointed to that single evening. They emphasized Louise's age. 18. No medical training. No understanding of how fragile an infant truly is. They described her as overwhelmed, homesick, and unprepared, but not a killer. Throughout the trial, Louise rarely showed emotion. Sometimes she cried quietly. Sometimes she stared straight ahead. Sometimes she seemed distant, almost numb. The public reaction was intense. Outside the courthouse, reporters gathered daily. Protesters held signs. Some demanded justice for Matthew. Others demanded fairness for Louise. In England, newspapers portrayed Louise as a victim of American justice. In the United States, opinions were deeply divided. Was she a murderer, or a young woman who made a fatal mistake? After weeks of testimony, the jury deliberated. They returned with a verdict that stunned the room. Guilty of second-degree murder. Louise lowered her head. Her parents cried. The Eapen family sat silently. But the story still wasn't finished. The judge, after reviewing the evidence, did something almost unheard of. He reduced the conviction. Second-degree murder was changed to involuntary manslaughter. His reasoning was careful and measured. He acknowledged that Matthew had died as a result of Louise's actions, but he did not believe she intended to kill him. Louise was sentenced to time already served. She was released. She returned to England. Matthew stayed in the ground. The case did not fade quietly. Years later, experts still debate the medical findings. Lawyers still argue the verdict. People still ask whether justice was truly served. But one fact remains unchanging. Matthew Eapen was an infant who depended entirely on others. And the person entrusted with his care lost control, even briefly, with irreversible consequences. The Eapen home eventually emptied. Life moved forward, but never fully healed. Some tragedies do not scream. They whisper. They happen in quiet houses, in trusted spaces, in moments no one else sees. And by the time the truth is uncovered, it's already too late. She was hired to protect him. And instead, the world learned how fragile trust can be.